This is my experience with drugs and where it essentially led me to.
I guess the first question that I wanted to ask was, do you remember the first time that you ever took a drug?
My first spliff I remember quite well, and that was when I was probably around 12. I was with a mate of mine. We were at school together, bought some weed or some friends, came back, and none of us could roll, and tried smoking them because they're so poorly rolled. We just couldn't really get high. But I just remember like pure kind of like action of like doing something which was quite naughty, kind of gave me a buzz.
Can you tell me a little bit about how your addiction to ketamine and even some stronger drugs ended up happening in the first place?
It's quite a sort of long and complex story, but yeah, so I mean, I started, as we just discussed, sort of smoking weed first, and that became quite habitual. Probably smoking most days from the age of, 12, 13, 14. So with that period of my life, that's when I also started sort of behaving quite badly at school. So essentially my behavior completely changed. So I went from being, like a very sort of kind, sort of gentle kid, didn't really cause anyone any issues, to someone who's like hyper aggressive, hypersensitive, always looking to cause trouble. So yes, I kind of moved schools, and then at the age of 14, my school found out about my cannabis use, and then they put me on drug tests. And I remember when they put me on drug tests, I kind of stopped smoking cannabis for the most part because I was afraid of getting expelled. And then that's when I started exploring different drugs: cocaine, MDMA, methadone, various psychedelics. It was really until I kind of found ketamine at 15 that I would say that it's when I first had a problem.
What was the effect of taking drugs on you as a person?
It's really hard to sort of put myself in that space because I don't remember much of my using. I can say that it gave me a sense of belonging, because obviously growing up, I thought I was a complete victim. The world was unfair. Didn't trust anyone. I always had this fear or this belief that I was going to die at a young age. And I was just very cynical, like very, very cynical. And when I used drugs, all these sort of negative feelings about myself and the world's completely dissipated. The fundamental problem which I had was this like belief that there was something fundamentally wrong with me. This sort of void which I feel, and I think a lot of addicts feel, in the pit of your stomach, just this like kind of like deep sadness, like just that I'm not all right. And that's what it is. And I use drugs to kind of get past that and actually function in the world, because my behavior towards the world was like deeply skewed and deeply misguided.
Did your friends and your family recognize what was going on, and how did they respond to your addiction to ketamine at the time?
I think it was really at the age of maybe like 16. Whenever I'd be home, like I saw it as an opportunity to just like get some money, get some drugs. In the early days when I started thieving, I was sort of quite good about it. Didn't, still too, things that were too obvious if they were to go missing. But then in the end, I stopped caring. So I kind of still, the bigger things, and people noticed that, bank cards were missing, watches were missing, like obvious things were going missing. And that's when I think my family sort of started questioning if I had a problem. And I remember when I was probably about 16, my dad and sister said to me, "Oh, Max, one day you're going to end up in rehab." I remember at the time, I thought, oh God, I mean, like, what are these guys talking about? Obviously, in retrospect, it was obviously, quite prophetic.
At what point did you recognize in yourself that something had gone really wrong?
The first time when I actually seriously questioned whether I had a problem was when I was 17. And I had an overdose. So I remember buying a synthetic cannabinoid. I forget the name. And I went upstairs, and obviously with synthetic cannabinoids, you meant to smoke them. But at the time, I didn't have anything to smoke it with. And so I just essentially wrapped in some salami, some fatty food to ingest it. And I remember eating it, going downstairs, and then I don't remember much after that. I just know that my dad, by chance, came back home with my stepmom, and they found me, brought me to hospital, and I was there overnight. My dad stayed there.
How did your family respond to that?
So my family were obviously like really concerned. And so after I spent the night in hospital, my mum and sister came down to give me some support. And I remember that night we went out for dinner or something. I don't know why I went for dinner with them. Like I was in no state to go for dinner. And I remember I left early and I went back home, and my sister had left her purse. And I remember going into her purse without really thinking about it and taking her bank cards and ordering more drugs. That was actually the first time I thought, God, like, do I really need drugs that badly? Like I've just had like a near-death experience. Like, why am I doing this? But I'd say like, the first time when I really realized I had a problem was when I was actually in rehab. I was in a detox room, and usually detox rooms are sort of like next to the nursing area, so you have like easy access if something bad happens. And I don't know why I thought about it, but I just thought, God, like, what if I could sort of access the nursing area? Because I really wanted to get high, because obviously they keep all the drugs there, methadone, benzos, whatever you want. And I was listening by the door, and I heard her go down, and she was gone for like a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. And I thought, okay, like this could be my chance. I opened the door like very slowly, walk outside, look downstairs, see if no one's coming. And there's two doors separating, me and basically the drugs cabinet, essentially. First door's unlocked, go in, and then the second door's unlocked, and I'm in. I remember the feeling of being inside, being like, oh my God, like I'm in. And then I open the drug cabinet, and I just see like, all the names, all the drugs. I think it's actually went in twice. Like I went out once, and like typical addict, like just wasn't enough. So then I went in again, got some more, and essentially got really high. The treatment center basically took the decision to send me to a government-funded psych ward, and like, I mean, when I heard this, I was really like gobsmacked. And I was on suicide watch, and I had this nurse follow me the whole time. And my bags were packed actually, and I remember like I think I was going to leave within like a day or two. And I remember I was sort of by the staircase, and my therapist came running up, and I remember this really well. And she came up to me and she said, "Max, like we're going to give you a second chance. You can stay." And like I remember at that moment, like it like everything dawned on me, and then suddenly I realized, oh my God, like maybe I do have a problem. Like maybe I am an addict, because for so long I didn't want to accept it. So yeah, I'd say like those two events were kind of the first two times, but particularly the second occasion, which I just described, was probably the first time I really realized that I had a problem.
You've referred to yourself a few times as an addict. What would you say the stigma around that word is, and why perhaps is that unhelpful?
It's a tough one. I mean, obviously it's loaded, because with an addict, and this was the perception I had, right? So when I first got clean and people were calling me an addict, I thought, like, how am I an addict? Because I've never stuck a needle in my vein. I thought an addict was like a particular subset of people, and really those who were like on the streets and Charing Cross, sticking needles in their arms. But actually I realized that an addict can be someone like me, it can be the banker at the city, it can be a politician, it could be anyone. Like there's no discrimination. I think addicts sort of get like sort of the worst end of the stick, and people don't recognize that when an addict's an active addiction, they're actually clinically unwell, and it's not a choice. No one chooses to become an addict. You just fall into it. Like no one wakes up one morning and says, God, I want to be a heroin addict. No one wants to be that way. Obviously it is like a loaded term, and it's definitely a label which people don't like, but it's something which I'm happy to own. For me, it's important to know that I am an addict, because if I forget I'm an addict, like I could very easily just like go back to active addiction and just go back to complete squalor, destruction, and chaos. It's who I am. It's not the totality of like my very essence, but like it's definitely a big part of my life, and I'm happy to own it. But I can see why people might not, because I mean some people have different experiences with that label and may have been stigmatized more than I have.
And your knowledge of the fact that you do struggle with addiction, how does that guide you through recovery even to this day?
So like through my experience, I know that I'm powerless over certain drugs and over my addiction. And for me, that's the bottom line. And people often say, like, do you not think you could have, a drink sometime in the future, or use this or that drug? And the reality is, like, for me, no. There's definitely a pretty big class of drugs which I just know I cannot touch and have a healthy relationship with. That's the bottom line for me.
I think that's so important, this idea of kind of knowing yourself and then setting boundaries for yourself. So can you tell me how you got to a place where you are today?
Yeah, so I mean, there are many reasons. I mean, the first reason really is actually dealing with my past, and that was through therapy, group therapy, dealing with my respective traumas growing up. And it's really just kind of accepting that I am an addict, and sort of using tools which are conducive to me living a good life. And those tools help me, essentially enable me to get outside my own head. Because actually, if I don't listen to the suggestions which were given to me when I first got clean, I become like totally self-obsessed and self-centered. And when I'm in those kind of spaces, that's when all my problems start coming up. So on a day-to-day basis, I just try, make the right decisions, make the right choices. It does feel that I'm very far removed from the person I was, like the 16, 17-year-old that I was, like really far removed. But then equally, like I'm literally one drug away from going back to that place. That's literally like how close I am. So I could, if I wanted to, I could, leave my flat, go to the offie, buy some booze and then get some drugs and, live that life. It's that easy. And it can literally take, a bad day or, accumulation of bad days, not working my program, isolating. I mean, that's kind of like how close it is or how easy it is for me to kind of pick up a drug and go back to active addiction.
My final question, I promise it's my final question. When you are having a bad day, where do you go? What do you do?
For me, like the best antidotes to like having a bad day is actually sharing about it to someone that I trust, because it's very easy for me to not share where I'm at with someone, partly because I don't like admitting that I'm struggling. But actually, if I share it with someone, like whatever problem I'm having, it loses its power. And even if that person doesn't have like the right words to essentially like help my predicaments, like literally just by sharing it to like another human being, it does lose its power. And also, a bonus would be that person can give me some perspective with their experience. So yeah, really sharing about problems and not keeping them to myself, because I think, sharing with another human being is like a fundamental tool which I've learned and which on most occasions like does help. I say 99% of the time it does help.